I think that's big in our culture. It's like you have to keep up with it or it for sure gets lost.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another ORIUNDI interview. Today I'm here with the wonderful Lisa Veronico and we're going to be talking today about her Under the Puglian Sun project, which is a home restoration project that her and her husband undertook in the Puglia region of Italy, in the specific town of Matino. Today we are based out of Naperville, Illinois, where Lisa and her family live. I'll let Lisa take it away and tell us more about herself and her background and where she grew up and her connection to her heritage.
Awesome. So I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, so it's close to Chicago. I've been teaching for 15 years to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school students. So I teach like family and consumer science, which is like cooking, entrepreneurship, life skills.
The good stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff. I'm only half Italian, if you can believe it. My mom is not, but I've always like had such, I don't know, a strong influence with the Italian culture on my dad's side. My great-grandma came from Sicily, and she immigrated as a 15-year-old from Sicily, Agrigento, Montevado to Alabama, and then she then went to Chicago. And then my grandfather's side came from Molise and Castel San Vincenzo. So it's always been like a really big influence on me. In 2007, when I graduated from high school, I went to Italy with my parents for a 3-week trip, which completely changed my life. Like the moment I stepped off the airplane, I just like felt like I was home, which I'm sure you feel the same way. Yeah. And it was like, I just wanted to go back. So then from that moment on, like every other summer or just about, we went to Italy as a family, and then I went with friends and studied abroad in college. And I've been to 15 out of the 20 regions in Italy. In Puglia, we went in 2012. We went to Vieste and Lecce, and it just was like so beautiful, and I loved it. And then I met my husband Joe 10 years ago, I think now, and he has family in Bari, in Puglia, and that was kind of how I just thought, I wanted a place that I called home. Like every time I left Italy, I just got really sad. So my dream was always to have a place that I can call home. So last summer, actually last spring, I just kind of told my husband, like, hey, let's look into these properties. Let's see if we could, purchase a property. What is the price? What is the real estate like? And to be honest, I listened to the Italian American podcast like 2 or 3 years ago. And Nikki Taylor was on there, she is an expat from Australia, and she moved to Puglia, and she helps crazy Americans like us buy property and find property that is good for an investment. So long story short, we ended up finding this place that we really liked. It's like 4 separate units in a courtyard, and I was able to find it because I sat on a Zoom call with Nikki, where other people were on it too, where they, show properties, and she says, hey, this is a good one or not. And so I fell in love with this. So then last summer, my husband Joe and I went to go see it. And then we decided to buy it. So that was kind of a whole process. And if it wasn't for Nikki, I don't think we could have been able to do it. And then from there, we had to get some work done. So we, talked to people through her that she really thought, she recommended. So people that can renovate the property and just, someone you could trust, which I think is huge. Especially American doing this from America, and you have to trust people from Italy. So yeah, it took 8 months to remodel, and then we were able to spend our summer for a month there this past summer. And Salento region of Puglia is awesome. There's beaches everywhere. Matino is really centralized, so it's a small town, but it's kind of near everything. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of how we started and kind of what took off.
Can you take me through why specifically you chose Puglia, or
Sure,
even
sure.
the exact specific area within the region?
Yeah. So Nikki Taylor, she had different classes and different articles, and she says right now, I actually just saw her Instagram, like Puglia's number one to buy property. Sicily's number two, and Tuscany's number three. In Tuscany, we were looking at as well, but I think it's very saturated. Um, I wanted to be by water. I wanted to be close to my husband's family, even though it is still 2 hours, because Bari and Matino are 2 hours away. But I just fell in love with the Salento region, being by beaches. In Naperville, Chicago, like we have Lake Michigan, but I miss the ocean, I miss the sea. So that's kind of how I found that place.
Yeah, no, understandable. I think the other thing a lot of people would want to know as well is just kind of a quick summary of the process from looking for a specific property to the purchase, and then obviously the renovation project that you did as well.
Yeah, so once you find the property, you know, it was quick for us, but usually it's not quick in Italy. And to be honest, like Nikki Taylor really was the forefront on the ground. She went there, she saw the property, like she showed it to us on Zoom. And then there's a ton of paperwork that has to be done. So you need somebody there, that if you don't speak Italian, like translating for you, translating the paperwork. We went to a notary when we put in an offer, and an offer, can take a while. For us, it didn't take that long. But I think it took maybe like 2 weeks for them to accept. And like I was being pretty anxious, but she said that's really normal and that's actually very quick. And so once they accepted our offer, there was kind of like a counter offer, and then we ended up purchasing the property. So we did have to be there to sign some papers at the notary office, but she was our power of attorney, and we had a power of attorney, which was Nikki, to be able to like continue signing more papers when we weren't there. So to be honest, if you go through this process, you really need somebody to trust, even if you're there, because there's so many things that are different than the American real estate that you need somebody that knows what they're doing. So, yeah.
I feel like that's probably the purchase of real estate in any other country. Yes. Everyone probably goes in with a little bit like, oh, this is going to be no big deal, very similar to how I do it in my country. Yeah. Yeah. And then, you go to a completely different country with completely different rules. And yeah, it's great that you had a contact there that did all that. I mean, it probably wouldn't have happened without her. For sure. And being connected to whoever else that she connected you to along the way. But that said, can you tell me a little bit about what you did with the property and what you turned it into?
Yeah, so one thing Joe and I learned after we purchased the property is Puglia, and I think all of Italy, like there is a humidity problem. So, everything, the building materials are made differently than obviously these American homes. So you could have like mildew, sometimes mold issues. So you want to do some type of anti-humidity treatment. And what happens is they kind of start from the ground up. So we had, like the flooring taken out, and they did treatments where they kind of worked from the ground up, and then on the walls too, which kind of help with that so that it doesn't develop mold and mildew over time. So that was something that we really weren't aware of. And just be aware of too, the renovation is going to cost more than you think because it's in euro and the building materials are just more expensive. So you have to budget for that. So we did the anti-humidity treatment. We also, through Nikki and through our project manager that worked in London for like 28 years, she recommended an interior designer. So the interior designer sourced a lot of this furniture for us at antique markets and was able to then go and place it in the property because she also has a property in Puglia. And I think the main focus is like trusting the people you work with, because there's horror stories of you send money over and you think all this work's gonna get done and then it doesn't. Yeah, and then it's gone. Or you assume that it's gonna get done and then they don't, and they just keep taking your money. So I think the bottom line is once you find a place, make sure you have a good team. Yeah, so.
And that said, going through the whole process, obviously you've always been pretty attached to your Italian heritage.
Yeah.
How do you feel like this process has connected you more?
Yeah, I think now it's like, Joe, let's go there in the summer. I'm a teacher, so that helps. And he also works remote, so we worked a few days there. But I think it just is like, that's the driving force. Always having that in the back of my mind and seeing their culture and how I want to bring that like into our family life. My heritage isn't from Puglia, but it's Sicily, it's Molise, it's keeping the culture in the family, just how they live their life, and it's more slow paced, it's more family oriented, it's more taking time, to just like relax and have an aperitivo or whatever it may be.
What's your favorite part of the cultural differences that you see there? First thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think the first thing is like the lunch is like 2 hours. And, you sit there and you're not rushing. Like, I think of here, it's like, as a teacher, I have 40 minutes for lunch and I'm like rushing at my desk, and it's like they take their time. And that's really what I miss the most. It's like that type of like slowing down, and then the people and the food that when I come back here, I miss the most.
And in that said too, given your Southern Italian American heritage, would you agree that there's a lot of similarities between maybe some of the ways that you grew up and the community around the Chicagoland area of Italian Americans to that there? Do you see similarities?
Yeah, I think it's like that tight-knit family, like keeping those cultural traditions. Like when we were there in Puglia in the Salento region, there's like a festival every weekend. And I know in Chicago there's, a ton of different festivals too, but I think sometimes, our lives get busy, so we want to take time for those because it's, tradition and keeping that in the family. So yeah, I think the tradition would be like the similarity or the overlap, and the family time and those values. Yeah.
And there's one thing I cannot fail to mention when talking about this. What are your favorite foods from the region?
Okay. Yes, so there's so many. The seafood's great. They have like these fried meatballs or this fried dough, and that's a lot. There's a lot of fried food there too. The desserts are great, and yeah, there's so much. Like the wine is different in that region. So yeah, I could go on.
It's hard to pick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and also I don't think we've mentioned yet, but we obviously spoke about your husband Joe, but you also have a daughter Valentina.
Yes.
And I was curious how this whole process has affected her and how it's passing forth the heritage through both the Italian American lens and the Italy lens from Puglia itself.
To be honest, Valentina, she's very lucky. This summer that was her third trip to Italy, and she's like 2, so lucky her. She's killing it. Yeah, like so I think she was kind of like the driving force when she was born. It was like, okay, I have this daughter, like what do I want for her? And I kind of reflected upon like my life and what I want for our family, and it was like keeping the Italian tradition, like because I think here you sometimes you just lose it very quick if you don't put a focus on it, because I don't know, American lives are very fast paced, and if you don't put that first, like it gets lost. So yeah, I think just showing her that there's different cultures out there, and I think sometimes we get so consumed here by like our American culture, but realizing like where did we come from? I'm really big on like these were your grandparents, these were your great grandparents, like their stories are so important. And kind of like where did you come from? I think that's the big one.
I agree with that. One of the things that I've noticed the last couple of years particularly is I've started to look into why I do things.
Yes, right.
Either what I do or why I do it the way that I do it. And a lot of times it comes back to things passed down through the generations. And I'm not just talking about the simple like, oh, I make a certain food this way, but why do I talk this way? Why do I think this way? Why do I act this way? And a lot of times it's your heritage. It's obviously geographically where you grew up. We're from the Chicago area, so there's certain things we do, a little bit of the accent, all that kind of stuff that comes from being from here, but also just, so it's very interesting to look back on those things and then especially connected to
Right.
Italy, where it's like, okay, a lot of this came from there from 100 years ago,
Right.
and it's survived because our families made a point of it, and
Yeah.
we're continuing to make a point of it as well.
Right, exactly.
Which is beautiful. But that said, you said I wanted to touch on something you mentioned as well about the kind of Italian American culture, or the general fast pace of American lifestyle, being in the Chicagoland area, which is a historical hub of Italian American culture. How would you describe the Italian American culture in general in Chicago, maybe from childhood all the way through today? What is changed? What does it look like to someone who doesn't know?
Oh man. So my grandparent or great grandparents, they went to the Grand and May Street area. So there's like a famous bakery, D'Amato's there. I think like our Italian American culture in Chicago, it's different than the East Coast. I really can't like pinpoint it, but I know we just have like different traditions, you know, like the roast beef sandwiches.
It is hard. There's definitely some differentiations. I
Yeah.
think at the core it's pretty similar because they, you know, at least in the past there was a lot of the old school neighborhoods.
Yes,
The
right.
culture was very blue collar.
Yeah.
You know, there's always like the saying that Italians built New York City.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, we had the Chicago fire in the late 1800s.
right,
I mean,
right,
things were building up. I think a lot of Italians also built a lot of parts of Chicago. But I think the food is different. The vibe is a little bit different
Yeah.
because geographically we're like kind of, there's Italians in the Midwest, but I
Yes.
think for the most part,
Right.
New York has Philadelphia right by it, they have
Yeah,
Boston right by it, they have
right.
New Jersey. They have like, so it's a little bit more of a rivalry, whereas Chicago is more like,
We're kind of
you're Italian American, this is it.
This
So
is
like
it,
everyone
yeah.
kind of was one web.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of crazy when you go around our communities, like if you don't directly know somebody in the Italian American community, you know somebody that knows them.
Yes,
And we're talking thousands and thousands of people, but there's still like this web of connections.
yeah.
That's the one part I would say, it's a little bit more local in Chicago, whereas in these other places there were so many more Italians.
Yes.
And it's so like the East Coast, there's so many cities, versus here it's like, okay, where am I going? Like, you know,
Yeah.
Indianapolis or like
Right,
Madison,
right,
Wisconsin.
right,
Like you're not really finding
It's
these
in Chicago,
communities.
yeah.
So not the other parts of the Midwest don't have them, but they're not close. Like Cleveland is not close to here. So stuff like that. But that's yeah.
And I would say too, like compared to the East Coast, we're so spread out. So like once my grandparents, great grandparents moved from Chicago, we all came to the suburbs. And I think that's kind of where we lost it a bit, is because we're so spread out now. Like, you know, I'm an hour from the city, or I'm like 40 minutes from my in-laws. So it's like it requires a little bit more effort, whereas maybe like the East Coast I feel like is more on top of one another. So it's a little bit easier to maybe keep some of those traditions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think cultures also diverge when you look
Yeah.
at certain cities and what the professions are, what the
Yes,
opportunities are. So based on the cities, I mean, Chicago is historically a meatpacking district. There's a reason why there's certain foods that showed up here. There's why certain professions showed up here, because it all centered around what industries were available.
Correct.
So, and it, you know, New York, for example, maybe had easier connections with Italy
Yes,
because
yes,
they're closer.
Right.
And I mean, even when planes started 70, 80 years ago doing the transatlantic flights,
Right.
they're going out of JFK first. And
Yes,
so that might have
exactly.
maintained some more connection. But
Good point.
yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of different things. But I mean, it's really cool to see that you grew up with the culture. It kind of got lost a little bit.
Yes.
You brought it back, and then you just went straight for it and took
Yeah,
it right
yeah,
back
yeah,
to
yeah.
Italy itself.
Yeah,
You went to the
exactly.
source.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, and with my family, it did get lost a little bit. And then I was born, and like you said, like I asked all these questions: why this? Why that? Why that? Okay, why don't we do that still? And I wanted to bring it back. And I think that's big in our culture. It's like you have to keep up with it, or it for sure gets lost.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to my parents about that as well, because
Yeah.
they grew up in an Italian American community, and it's like they never really asked those questions either because they lived it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's our generation.
We're more, we get a little bit more interested in that. But that said, back to your Puglia project.
Yes.
In general, what if someone's looking to buy property or invest in Italy? What's some advice that you can give them that like you cannot miss these things?
Yeah, I would say like Puglia is really, I mean, it's the tourism is like increased so much. Start there. sometimes when you're looking on these like real estate websites, they might not show everything, or like you kind of like need to be at the property to make sure that this is what you want, or have somebody there to see it. Again, I think it goes back to like knowing somebody that can help you through the process. I would never do this by myself. I wouldn't know how to do this by myself. I wouldn't want to know how. I mean, so that's why like having a contact, again, Nikki Taylor's great. But that's my biggest thing. Like, find an area first. I think somebody once said, like, Italy, it's hard to pick a favorite place. Like, it's hard to pick your best friend because they're so different, like from the north to the south. And it's like, what do you want? So list out those, 5, 10 things you want from a property. And then, look online, but make sure too that you have somebody there to see it, or if not yourself, and somebody that you can trust with this whole process. And if you need it renovated, if you need work, somebody that you can for sure trust, because that's kind of the bottom line. But Puglia, I would say, is like a great region. It really is. There's a lot that you can do there, and just a variety of different, scenery and stuff. So those are kind of my tips.
That makes sense. Yeah, it sounds like it comes kind of down specifically to having someone that you can trust, yes, because you're across the pond, as we say.
Yes, so, exactly.
And then the final question I'll ask you is another piece of advice. Sure. As a young Italian American who's went through the road and the journey of, almost rediscovering a little bit the heritage, connecting better, what is some advice you can give to younger people that are looking to do the same thing that you did, or just connect back or connect more with their heritage?
Yeah. I think figure out like your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, like figure out like your ancestors. I think that's number one, because, well, first off, if you don't know where your family's from, figure that out first. Go on Ancestry, go on, I don't know, Family Search, like ask questions to the older generations. I think once you start digging and figuring out, okay, these are the regions I'm from, these are my ancestors, go to the ancestral hometowns. And to be honest, I've never been, but I'm planning on going this spring to Montevago and Agrigento. Yeah, I'm like, that's one of my goals too, is figuring out, like where I came from. But I think start there, figure out where your family came from, figure out your ancestors, have their name, have their stories. I think that's important. And then I know for me, like my family lost a lot of recipes, or my grandma was the 5th born. So, by the time she was born, like nobody wanted to teach her a lot of those recipes. So some of them are lost. And I think like asking your family, like, okay, what are some recipes or traditions? And even if you want to start making your own, that's fine. Like, find authentic recipes online, start somewhere, right? But I think keeping up with those values is important.
That's wonderful. That's great advice. And to find out a little bit more about Lisa, she has an Instagram account. I'll leave the link down in the description. But if you want to follow more of her journey, see how she does all the amazing things that she does, what her place looks like, and all the trips that you guys do out there as well. And also, you have your resident expert of Italian real estate here as well. But it was wonderful having you. It was wonderful chatting.
So
it's always a pleasure to talk with people that are celebrating heritage, and even going back to the motherland, as we say, and investing. So, but anyways, thank you so much.
Thank you. That was great.